Well, in working with guys, one of the questions that often comes up is this: why do I do the same things over and over again, despite my best efforts and desires? And to follow that question up, how do I break this cycle? Well, today I want to share with you a tool called What Time Are You? It's a tool that I developed, which I think has proved to be very helpful in helping guys reverse engineer some of the cyclical behaviors that they find themselves stuck in. And more importantly, how do they chart a new way forward out of those old cycles? So welcome aboard.
Guys ready?
When it comes to porn, are you stuck, spinning out, or slipping backwards in your life? If so, then welcome to the Finding Traction podcast, a show dedicated to those who are looking to gain recovery momentum away from porn and toward the life and relationships they have always hoped for. Now, here's your host, Vern Tomke.
Well, let me just say before we get started, I do love to connect with guys individually, where I can walk with them and coach them towards creating a better life for themselves. And the other thing I love to do is meet with guys in groups. I meet with guys in Zoom groups, guys from pretty much all the different continents, other than Antarctica, I guess, where we basically encourage each other, and together we strategize around how to be more successful in creating porn-free lives that are reaching for something better. And if you want to be a part of either some individual coaching or join one of the groups, I'd love you to get a hold of me at bandofbrothers.care@gmail.com. That's bandofbrothers.care@gmail.com. Well, as I'd mentioned earlier, I do want to delve into this question around the cyclical nature of our acting out. It's one of the things that, people who work specifically with addictive behaviors, they've noticed this, so much so that guys like Patrick Carnes have come up with what they call the addiction cycle, where they really seek to map out some of those realities, why we end up in the same place over and over again, despite our best intentions. And I found some of that material helpful. I have it in the Finding Traction course, but I guess over the last couple of years, I've developed a bit of a different version of that cycle. I put a bunch of different concepts together in a blender, and I came up with my own model that has proven to be helpful with guys. So today I would love to share that with you. And hopefully you have the ability to visualize this, because I want to introduce to you a diagram. Now, this is going to be a lot easier for some of you older guys who know what a mechanical stopwatch looks like. Yesterday, I was watching the intro to 60 Minutes, the news story, and they had a mechanical stopwatch on there. And maybe you need to go and figure out what that is. But when I was in high school, the phys ed teacher, they would have these mechanical stopwatches, and they would use to measure our times for, various things like running track. Now, again, that might be hard for you if you've never seen one, but I've hopefully made it a little bit easier for you. If you go on the website, which is bandofbrothers.care, and you click on the tab that's called Free Resources, you will be able to sign up for a number of PDF downloads. And one of those downloads is this stopwatch diagram. Now, again, for those of you who may be walking or driving and can't do that right now and are only hearing the sound of my voice, let me try to explain what a mechanical stopwatch is. Okay, it's a mechanical device. It has a clock face on it, and it counts the seconds from 0, which is at the very top, through a clock face. 30 is at the bottom, and then you come back around to the top again, which either is 60 or 0 again. Okay, 0 or 60 at the top, 30 at the bottom. You get the idea. Now, on the edge of this mechanical stopwatch, you have two buttons. The first button is at the very top. It's the larger button. And when you press that button, the clock starts ticking. The needle starts moving. Tick, 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 tick. 5 seconds, 10 seconds, 15 seconds, and so on and so on. Now, when you press the big button once, the clock stops ticking. If you press the big button again, it continues clicking. 15 seconds, 20 seconds, 30 seconds at the bottom, then back around the other side. Okay, so that's the big button at the top. Now, there's also a smaller button, which can either be at either the 2 o'clock position or the 10 position. It depends. It's a smaller button, and for today's talk, it serves a very important function. If you want to reset the needle back to the very top or the beginning, 0 or 60, what you'll do is the clock is ticking, you will stop the clock ticking, okay, by pressing the big button once, and then you will click on the smaller button. Once this needle has stopped, clicking or ticking, you will then press the smaller button and the timer needle returns back to the very top or 0. Now you might be going, well, this is all very interesting, Vern, a trip back memory lane. I'm so glad we had this conversation. But this is a really important word picture because I want to now apply it to recovery. Because what I have done is I have created 7 way stops or stations or states that we're going to put at different positions around the edge of this clock face. Now, for me, of course, it's important that they all start with the same letter because that's just the way I roll as a communicator. So here we go. The first and most important state, station, or way stop is at the very top, the 12 noon position, the 0 or 60 position. And that, we'll call it a state or station, is called peace. P-E-A-C-E. Peace. And that is the place where we're living in peace or serenity or a place of equilibrium and where we feel good and grounded and centered. We're making the right choices. We're feeling good about our day. And we, hopefully we all know a little bit of what that feeling could feel like. Now, we all wish, of course, that we can live at that place all the time. And it's great when that happens. Now, but you probably know that that's not always the case. So, next thing we're going to do is we're going to write the next station or state, and we're going to put it, let's say, at about the 2 p.m. position. And we're going to call that state preoccupation. Now, at that state, we are now wrestling with obsessive or compulsive sexual thoughts or ideas or temptations. Now you say, well, what happened between that great state of peace and that new state of preoccupation? And that is where on the diagram we put a bit of a lightning bolt, and we call that lightning bolt the trigger. And we simply say something happened in your day that triggered you, that caused you to go from that great place of 12 noon or 0 or 60, and now you are in a place where you're now dealing with obtrusive sexual thoughts and urges. It could be something internal, it could be something external, but the clock is now ticking. Tick, 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 tick. Okay, the next state or station we're going to put around, 3 or 4 o'clock on the dial. So it would be like at the 15, 20 second of the old stopwatch. And now that is called P for pursuit. And at this point, we have now added our intentionality to preoccupation. We've now intentionally doing things to add to that preoccupation. We've entered into a process of fantasizing or edging or engaging a well-worn set of rituals that now set us up for acting out. At this point now, our will or desire has been, I guess you could say, effectively captured, or it's been hijacked. And we are now, as we move through this, we are now in full-blown pursuit. Some guys have said, Vern, this all feels really accurate. In fact, the only thing I would add to this is it feels like the ticking is actually speeding up. And that may be the case where it feels like it's actually speeding up. So, in that place of pursuit, it may mean as we go through these rituals, we might act out today, or we might not. We might simply act out at the first opportunity we have to act out. But at this point, it effectively feels almost like a foregone conclusion that we're going to end up in our next station or state or way stop. And that is at the very bottom of this clock face. We'll call it at the 32nd or 6 o'clock part. And that is, of course, the porn event. Right? And we all know what the porn event looks like for us. It has a certain process. It could be porn, masturbation, orgasm, whatever it is, or some aspect of that we now relapse, and we've now effectively gone from a state of equilibrium or 12 noon or green. We've now relapsed, and we now, in our groups, we call it, we've gone red. You go, okay, well, that's only, aren't we done the cycle then? And you go, no. I've only put that at the very bottom of this clock face because there's further steps that now happen in this process. Let's say now at the 7 o'clock or maybe the 42nd place, we're now going to add another station, and we're going to call that P for pain. And what follows our acting out is now this well-worn experience that we all have of something that feels like pain. It could be regret or self-recrimination, self-hatred, something where we go, I can't believe I did that. So we now find ourselves in a place of emotional distress. Now, we want to minimize that, so then we move on to the next station. The next station we are going to put at, let's say, the 9 o'clock position or the 45 second position, and we're going to call that the state or station of P for protect. And this is where we seek to protect ourselves from consequences. We hide our activities. We seek to recover the lost time that we weren't working or doing what we needed to do by working harder to almost to be able to tell ourselves, well, it's like it almost didn't happen. Which we know it did happen, but if I can cover up, if I can make up for lost time, it's kind of like it didn't happen. But emotionally, we still have a problem, and sometimes oftentimes there will be a last station that I'm going to put on this cycle, and it's, let's say, at the 10 o'clock or at the 50-second mark, and we're going to call this the state of P for promise. And where I've seen oftentimes this state get played out is we attempt to insulate ourselves from the internal pain by telling ourselves a promise. The promise could be like, I won't do that again, or that was the last time, or this time I really learned my lesson, or I almost got caught, and that's it. We're done now. Of course, it's not really the accurate case. But the point here is the promise insulates ourselves, and almost we fool ourselves to thinking, phew, that was it. The promise also serves another really key function for us, which is really unfortunate. When we've promised ourselves that this was the last time, or we're not going to do it anymore, or, okay, now we've taken the steps so this doesn't happen again, that promise keeps us from reaching out to others for help. Because we don't need to reach out for help or tell a person in our lives or our spouse or whatever it is. We don't need to, because this really was the last time and we really mean it and we're done with that. Well, until the next time, of course. So there you have a rough idea of the stopwatch concept. Again, you can go in and download the PDF, go on the website, and that might be helpful for you to walk through and see the different stations or states around this stopwatch. So then, so Vern, how do you actually use this to help guys who are caught in these cycles? Well, the very first thing we do is we help guys develop an awareness as to knowing what takes them off that 12 o'clock or 0 or 60 position, that very top, that place of peace. And we ask questions. Was it something that happened to you that you had no control over? Or was it some sort of unsound thing in your environment that you tripped over again and again? What and when did the clock get triggered and the needle start ticking? Tick, tick, tick. It wasn't ticking on Monday. Why was it ticking on Tuesday? What happened? Perhaps it was an ad. It was a TV show you watched. It was something clickbaitish that you clicked on. Maybe it was a fantasy that presented itself to you, or a gal you saw when you're at the coffee shop, or a dream you had. When was that moment? You need to recognize it. You need to be aware of that fateful moment when you went from a place of equilibrium to a place of now the clock is ticking. That is super important, and we'll get to that, why that's important in a minute. Because what we'll often do is we'll often say, okay, well then what happened when there was no intervention? Let's then talk about where you went from just being preoccupied to pursuit. What did you begin to do, and what are the rituals that you begin to practice that took you from a place of just having these random thoughts to where now you were engaging those thoughts? Did you go on a long YouTube session where at some point you were just aimlessly scrolling through videos hoping to see something? Were you scrolling through Facebook videos? Did you go from a place where now you were just panning and scanning everybody in your environment for some sort of good-looking, arousing sort of person? And we'll talk to guys and say, at what point did it go from you feeling like you were in control to what point where you now felt it was inevitable that you were going to act out? And then we get into the point of, okay, well, let's talk about the experience of that. Let's do a deep dive. Let's reverse engineer that. And really, as you talk about it, more and more guys go, you know what? The longer I allowed that clock to be ticking, the less likely that I wanted to stop the ticking clock. And you're going, exactly. And most guys go, okay, I think I get this. But here's the question. What do I do? And this is the question that's asked over and over and over again using this diagram. Okay, Vern, I don't feel like I can stop that clock when that clock starts ticking. I don't feel I can stop that from happening. And the answer would be, you're exactly right. There will always be something that takes you off that place of peace or equilibrium and starts the clock ticking. That will still happen. Doesn't matter how long you've been in recovery. You go, well, that just sucks. And the answer is yes, it does. Then they go, okay, well, if that's the case, then how do I press that big button at the top to stop that clock? I'll say, okay, well, that's a good question. But the problem with just stopping the clock is chances are something's going to press that top button again. Let's say you stop it at the, the 10-second mark. Something's eventually going to press that again, and it's just going to continue ticking. 15, 20. You go from, again, that place of preoccupation to pursuit. So then they go, okay, I get it. So then here's the question. My clock has been triggered. Where and how do I find that little button, the one that can actually, not just pressing the big button that stops it, but that little button that actually sets me back to a place of equilibrium that doesn't cause me to go through the whole cycle towards the porn event. And that's where the rubber hits the road, and we begin to work with guys on finding things that work for them individually. We go, okay, so what happened when the clock was triggered and started ticking? How do you stop that clock wherever it is in the process? Is it that you go out for a walk, you get yourself away from your computer or the TV? Is it that you take a cold shower? Do you go for a run? Do you, I got some guys that have a bit of a liturgy they practice or something like that. What do you do to stop that clock? That's the first thing. You got to stop it. But then the next thing I say is to find that second reset button. In my experience, there's really only one or two things, really only one thing that for me actually effectively set me back to that true north place of at the very top. And that is being in relationship, checking in with guys and saying, guys, something happened in my day that caused that clock to tick. I want to just check that in with you. I want to tell you what happened. I don't have to get into the gory details and trigger everybody else, but it could simply be, we started watching this show. This is what happened to me. I started watching this show and there was a gal on this show and I go, my goodness, that really fits my arousal template. And that left me wanting to check her out on doing some research, as one of my friends calls it. And I realized at that point the clock had started ticking. I just want to check that in. And as I do that, all of a sudden, eventually, that, not just have I stopped the clock, it resets back to 12 noon. Or as I've sometimes put it, the craving dies a natural death without me having to act on it. And one of the things we've all learned is the longer that I wait to address that ticking clock, the less likely I'm going to do anything to interrupt the cycle. Sometimes after guys will report a relapse to me, I will ask them this question. It's not to shame them, but it's just to get them to think. I'll say to them, so why didn't you reach out? And the answer is usually, we develop a lot of trust and guys, aren't really shamed by me, hopefully. And they'll say things like, well, because I didn't want to. So why didn't you text me or reach out to one of the guys and you go, well, I didn't want to. And it's true. You didn't want to, which I totally get. But what does that mean on this diagram? Well, that just means that I waited too long. By the time I really was aware of what was going on, I was already in the pursuit stage, right? Or I'd moved from preoccupation to pursuit. And so what we'll do more and more is we will work with guys on early intervention. The sooner you recognize, the greater your awareness is, then you can reach out when you still have a little bit of that desire to reach out. Sometimes I'll work with guys to say, okay, well, what would stop you from that early place of knowing the clock is ticking from reaching out? Or why didn't you reach out? And sometimes guys will say things like, well, I didn't really want to bother anybody. Or, it didn't really seem like a big deal at first. And so we'll work on some of those minimizing behaviors or thoughts that keep them from reaching for that all-important second button that resets them back to a place of equilibrium. Sometimes with our guys or our groups, I'll say, okay, guys, I want you to reach out 3 times this week. And I want you to do it not even if it's, just reach out. Say, hey, did you watch that football game yesterday? Even if it's just to get in the habit of reaching out, or, man, I can't believe how this cold weather sucks, or something. Just so you get into the habit of reaching out, you develop the practice of reaching out. Even send me something funny, just so you get into that habit. So when you need to reach out, you've already developed the habit of doing that. Now, the last area of pushback I sometimes get, and it's sadly accurate, is someone goes, okay, well, here's the problem with this stopwatch diagram. Once I go through the cycle of acting out, I go from peace to, if I've ever experienced real peace, that's another question. But once I go from the place of preoccupation to pursuit and the porn event, and then I go through my pain, my protection, my acting out, I never feel like I really get back to that true north, that 12 o'clock, that zero position. I just go from that 10 o'clock place to just jumping over to a brand new trigger and a brand new preoccupation. And that is true. That's the really depressing part of this cycle, where we never actually experience a place of peace or serenity. Guys, I'd love to work with you in terms of helping you, first of all, experience that. It's the best feeling, especially when you've lived a contested life, or a life where you feel like you're just repeating this cycle over and over and over again without actually experiencing true peace. So again, I'd love you to reach out to me. My email is bandofbrothers.care@gmail.com. We'll see you next time.